All right, so I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker. Pam Sandlian-Smith is a community builder. She's built communities in several places. That's something that resonates with Vermonters, I've noticed, whether it's about buildings or about relationships. It's very important here in Vermont, so I think that you'll all understand where Pam's coming from. Her community building happens to involve creating library spaces and library teams that help people fall in love with libraries and make those libraries the community hub. She's the director of Anythink Libraries in Adams County, Colorado, just north of Denver. Through her leadership, the public library system went from being the worst funded system in the state of Colorado to one of the most recognized library brands nationwide by creating an entirely new service model. Along with the building of 5 new libraries and 3 renovations, Anythink reinvented libraries focused on participatory learning, community engagement, and shifting perceptions of the role of libraries themselves. Pam was the 2010 Colorado Librarian of the Year and the recipient of the 2012 Public Library Association's Charlie Robinson Award for Innovation and Risk-Taking. She has also been honored for her work in library technology innovation and early literacy projects, all of which I know are important to us in Vermont. So I would like to thrilled to welcome Pam Sandlian-Smith.
My challenge is going to be standing behind this line today. Because if I go over that line, I'm going to burst your eardrums. First of all, it's such a pleasure to be in Vermont. This is my first time. And when Christine emailed me about a month or so ago and said, we're doing this project, are you interested? And I said, Vermont? Vermont? That sounds like a great place to go. And I'm so grateful also because I've been watching your weather. And I said yes, and then I looked at your weather, and you know we have a fair amount of roller coaster weather in Colorado, but I kept thinking, ooh, we're going to have to wear really warm winter clothes. But Christine promised really good weather, and she delivered. So thank you. I've been the library director at Grandview Library System, which transferred to Anythink Libraries for about 6.5 years. And the first 3.5, 4 years of that time really was all about building buildings and reorganizing everything else in the library. And I'm not going to talk about that part. We're going to talk about planning spaces today and how we approached planning spaces, which is a slightly different approach from a traditional approach. And so this was my library when I inherited it. This is actually a Denver Post article in 2004, worst library system in Colorado. We were the poorest funded. My library board, which is absolutely a terrific board, had the tenacity, had the dream, the vision that our libraries in Adams County were going to improve. And they became a special taxing district, and then they tried 3 times to increase the mill levy so that we would have adequate funding. And in 2006, the voters of Adams County said yes, and so we went from about $4 million funding per year to about $12 million. That's for a population, I know that probably sounds like a ton of money, but that's for a population of about 350,000 people. So we went from the worst funded library system to the second worst funded library system in Colorado. And everybody thought it was, when I came on board, I thought, this is like winning the lottery. Everybody thinks this is a ton of money, but for all the work that we have to do, I'm going to have to manage this process very, very carefully and manage expectations. And of course, I always want the best as well. So we looked like this when I came on board. This was our bookmobile. We actually were, our library system was the bookmobile for a while. This is one of our little libraries in the rural area. This is one of our suburban libraries, Pearl-Mac. These were the buildings, with the exception of this one right here, that I actually inherited. So we went from this to this. I know you want to watch it again. And how did we do it? We did it again because there are two of our board members, Kay Riddle, who was our chair, and Ray Coffey, who has been on the board now for close to almost 10 years. And they're fearless leaders who had the courage to trust me. They had the courage to take some risks, to think about libraries in a different way. When they hired me, they said they wanted our new libraries to be like bookstores, LEED certified, because sustainability is really important to us, and they wanted fireplaces in all the libraries. There were two board members that were on the design committee that had been shepherding a project, and when I came on board, we had an architect selected that actually designed all of our spaces, all 7 of them. They were well underway. They were into design development on a couple of buildings, and I came in and I looked at the project and I looked at the plans and did what any new library director should do, which is to be really mindful and thoughtful. And I said, let's just take another look at this before we invest $43 million in a project and make sure this is really what we want to do. And our $43 million was for all 4, now 5 new library buildings and renovating 3 spaces. We did a pretty quick realignment, and that was like my second board meeting, I think, in which we looked at the capital project really carefully. I also, my first meeting with the architect, Dennis Humphreys with HPA, there was, and I have it here, there was a plan that had been designed for about twice as many books as we had space for. And I'm going to show you the template in a minute. But I said, you know, I don't see any room in this plan for people. Where are we going to put them? And Dennis said, well, we haven't really planned for that. He was just following directions and designing the library in a typical way. And I said, I think we need to take a step back and let's just take a few minutes to kind of rethink how these spaces need to be. And I was grateful that he said, I welcome that opportunity. And I was grateful that the Board of Trustees said, we're willing to, because you only get to build a building once and you need to do it right. I have the plan for the exact same building that happened a year later that's quite different. And I'm going to show you that, and you're welcome to look at both of these. But the reason we changed our mind is instead of designing the typical way, which is, I worked with a number of library consultants who help us with project planning and space planning. And the typical way to start is you count how many books you have, you count how many tables you need, you count how many chairs you're going to need, and then you project, like, how many are you going to have in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And years ago, that was a projection, and now those numbers might be going down. But that's where the planning started. And I basically said, we need to throw that piece out for the moment. We need to think about what people are going to be doing in the libraries. Let's plan for how people use library spaces. And so this picture here is the other component of how we got to be where we are. And that's one of our librarians, Mo, and one of our customers are seniors. And clearly, this isn't the typical way that you would use a library, at least the library that I would have gone to in the 50s, 60s, or early 70s. So to get us started, I'm going to ask you to work in small groups for just a couple minutes, maybe 2 or 3 or 4, whatever is comfortable. And what I'd like you to do is do a little brain dump, which is I'd like you to use adverbs only and come up with a list, and I'm going to give you probably about 5 minutes. Using verbs, I want you to list as many verbs as you can think of things that people do in libraries. Isn't this fun? And you can do it all day, right? You'll have other opportunities to talk with each other, but this is just an example of how to get you going. And I'd love for people to, I'm going to record a couple of your words, so just shout them out, like in 5-second increments so I can write them. Read.
Study.
Explore. Dance. Research. Eat. Drink. Tell stories. Build. Learn. Knit. Compute.
Fundraise.
Gossip.
Good. Print. Store.
Relax.
View.
Create. Share.
Connect. Socialize. Grow.
Okay, I'm going to stop because I'm out of paper. Actually, we could do this for a long time, but you get the sense that libraries are really very active places. They're very different places from the kind of Carnegie Library that when I was growing up in Sioux City, Iowa, in the late 50s, early 60s, I would go to the library. I actually just wandered into our little library by accident one day. I think I was 5 or 6 years old, and it was this marvelous place, and it was a place where I could discover books and I could check a book out and maybe go to a story hour, but that's what happened. And today our libraries are so different because we learn in different ways. And so when I started working at Rangeview Library, we actually did a project that was a word project to help formulate our vision. And we went from the floor plan that looked like this, which is a very traditional floor plan. And for the architects in the room, this is probably something very, very familiar to you. You see, it's going to be pretty hard to dance in that space. That space is really organized for books, for collections, and for people to study. And we went from this floor plan to this floor plan. You know, Now, one thing that's a little discombobulating in a way is we actually doubled the space because we were going to build a 25,000 square foot building, and I put money together in different ways. We didn't spend more money, we just put it together in a little different way. And we built a slightly bigger building, and we included our administrative offices and staff spaces, which are quite small over here. But you can tell this space, there's a lot of fluidity, there's a lot of motion, and there's also a lot of empty space. And this is how we did it. So when we started, it was a slightly different variation of what you guys just did, is we started with using adjectives actually to describe the kind of library we were going to become. Dynamic, provocative, welcoming, wholesome, intuitive, mountain, enchanting, nature, cozy, friendly. Now that is a very different kind of space from the space that had been originally designed by our architects. And our architects were simply doing what everybody had asked them to do. So we selected a couple of keywords to use as we were defining and describing and designing our spaces. And we're going to take a little bit of time to go through each of these. Soaring. When we walk into the library, we want people to have this feeling of, this is my place, I can do anything, I can become anything, I'm welcome here. And we work under the idea of Paco Underhill. He's a space designer for retail, actually. When you first walk in, he says, you need to have a time, a space to actually kind of orient yourself, to gather yourself, and to feel like this is your space. I always feel like I want people to feel like they're getting a metaphorical hug when they walk in the library. And when I walk in our libraries, and if I don't feel like I get that hug, I know something's wrong. But you can tell. I mean, often, and when you go back to your libraries, think about it. Lots of times when you walk up to a library, in a library, there's all sorts of signs all over the place, all sorts of things taped to the windows. And those are the things that people first see, and that's how you're projecting your personality of the library. And really what we want people to do is to come in and feel like, oh man, I could dive into this space and I could read something, I could do something, I could become something. This is one of our children's spaces. Again, these are museum quality trees. We wanted to have tree houses in our libraries because of that feeling of being in a tree house and owning your world and imagining who you could be or what you wanted to do. And we had troubles designing tree houses that actually looked like tree houses that would meet code. So this is so we settled for trees. And that sense of soaring, I think, is there. So we want libraries to be aspirational and inspiring places. Another of our kind of reading spaces, relax. I think that's one of your words. Contemporary. Our library system is just north of, so Adams County is just north of Denver. We're suburban and rural. About 12,000 square miles. We reach out beyond the airport probably by about 40 or 50 miles, very, very rural. And then a number of suburban towns that are actually bedroom communities, mostly for Denver and Boulder. This is our Brighton branch, which was a rural community, but became a very contemporary looking mix of contemporary and actually kind of comfort ranch. This was one of our remodels that was in a pretty low-income neighborhood. This was actually, I don't know if you're going to remember the slide, but my first slide, that little suburban branch I said, that's that building. Remodeled, and a very frugal remodel. Our funding for our library buildings is very moderate. Our FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, was very limited. I think it was about $15. And so we just pushed the envelope as far as we could to get the quality of design and the quality of building and spaces that we could. This is our largest grant, the Right Funds grant. So we're very contemporary, but our community didn't want us to be ostentatious. So we were very mindful of that. Our design is quite simple in a way, but also quite elegant. This is another one of our remodels in a commercial area. It's actually, if you're driving from the airport into Denver, this is you drive past the public utilities, and it's fairly undesirable place, but the community there deserves as beautiful of the library as we can possibly deliver for them. Natural. So in Colorado, like Vermont, that connection to nature is something that's really important to us, and so we kept all of our tones and our materials connected to nature. So this is kind of a bare grass resin that we use quite a bit. Our indoor-outdoor spaces is really important. This is one of our parks. That's a 1-acre park that our community supported. And the kids and the families just absolutely adore it. And of course, our gardens are really important to us. We have actually a xeriscape garden in that library. We pay a lot of attention to our outdoors because people in Colorado, just like in Vermont, I think you love to spend time in the outdoors. And our learning space extends to the outdoors. Well, have you ever walked into any space? It might be a library, it might be another space, and you know immediately that you aren't supposed to be there? I get that feeling sometimes when I walk in the library and I see these big old desks. And I see a staff person sitting behind the desk, and they're just kind of burying their head. We really work on, number one, we didn't build any of those desks. And our staff, we would never tolerate that. So welcoming. One of the ways to welcome folks is to create spaces that feel very human. And so this is one of our fireplaces at our Commerce City Library. This is our little Bennett Library that is actually 7,000 square foot, beautiful space out on the plains that serves a community of about 2,500 people. That was the library that was that little tin hut. Now this is what it looks like. It's just gorgeous. When we first started, there actually wasn't funding in the budget to build a library out in the community, but there's nothing else out there. And of all the places, this is the community that needs a library, I think. As more probably than some of our other communities. So we had to build a lovely space for them. And then this is our Brighton Library. Inspiring. Lots of spaces for people to work where they feel comfortable. And so in the library, we created spaces that are places where people can collaborate, and I'll talk about that in a bit, but also places where people can go to the edge. There's edge people and there's people who want to be in the middle of things. And then on any given day, you might feel like you want to collaborate, and then another day you might feel like you want to be by yourself and be on the edge. But every place you go, we try to make our spaces look gorgeous and inspiring and wonderful. This is one of our program spaces at the Brighton Library. It has this gorgeous, you can kind of see this gorgeous kind of TP-like quality. And we do all sorts of things in here. We do story hour, we've done museum quality displays and exhibits. We've done sometimes during the day, this is a quiet place to study. So versatility is something that's ever so important. Nobody ever has as much space as you need or you want. So planning for flexibility and versatility. If there's nothing else that you walk away from today, is versatility and flexibility, because things are going to change. And you're going to want to use that space in lots of different ways. My staff actually wants to have a place that's just for story hour. And I keep saying, we can't do that, because that space it needs to be used all day long in different ways. So we created spaces. This space connects to the children's department. It also is very close to the teen department, but it's a space that can be used for all sorts of different things. So this is in an entryway when you first walk into one of our branches, and immediately you get the signal that this is a place where I can just discover, and I could walk down and I can read it if I want to. Creativity, creative. Going back to our children's space, we design our spaces so that there's lots of opportunities that kids can be themselves. And you know, kids learn by talking with each other, they learn by playing with each other, and so we actually have a fair amount of open space that it's defined, but it also is open to what the kids or what the people want to do on that given day. We have lots of furniture, manipulables that actually the kids can move around themselves. I've been in libraries where people want the furniture to be heavy, so people can't move it around. Well, that's ridiculous.
Is that an interior space?
Excuse me?
Is that an interior space?
This is interior. This is in the children's library in our largest branch. This is another variation of our tree house concept, which it's actually a tree sculpture, and there's 3 of these. And inside each one of these, the kids go in, and they each have different personalities. One is night sky, and so there's lights up above that look like the sky, the constellations. One of them is frogs or swamp, and they walk in, and there's actually plastic frogs, and when you walk in, it's motion detected, and you hear the sounds of frogs in the swamp. And then there's one that's water that you walk in, and there's this kind of a beautiful light sculpture, and then there's water sounds like somebody brushing their teeth, or the water coming on, and the kids, it's just a way to experience spaces in different ways. The sound we can turn it off. The other thing that happens is, this goes back to that treehouse concept, is the kids actually go in these spaces and they do things like they play checkers, they play chess, sometimes they read together, they talk together, they tell stories. Moms and their kids go in and they just have their own little space. So again, it's just creating those little creative spaces for people to use in ways that they feel really comfortable.
Okay. Do you think that children's space in general needs more open space? It's just looking at what Ben presented. It seems like the adult space is a little more closed in and the children's space is a little more open.
I actually think everybody needs more open space. But children definitely, because children, the way they learn is by moving around in their environment and touching it and manipulating it and owning it with other kids. And as you all know, that the library is a place where kids, generally speaking, it's their first social encounter with other children often. It's their way to get to know other children and get familiar with the world that's outside of their family. And the way they do that is by moving around and moving things around and feeling like it's their home. So, true confessions, I'm a former children's librarian. Of course, I'm a children's librarian forever in my heart. So, something that the editor of Library Journal, Rebecca Miller, said a couple of years ago when she came into one of my libraries. She said, "You've turned the whole library into a children's library family." So, adults need more space too, more open space.
What are the floor surfaces that you're using? Are they tile or carpet?
These are actually carpet tiles. And we use the same company, it was Shaw Carpet. It was the same carpet throughout the entire library system. And one of the reasons we did is number one, it was very high quality carpet, and it was way overpriced, and I kept saying I can't afford that, and we finally got the bid down to the price that we could afford. It's also very natural, And so we wanted, there's a lot of really ugly carpet out there, that's what I have to say. And we wanted carpet that was strong enough to withstand the needs of heavy traffic, but also beautiful. Playful. Yes, we do different things. We dance in the library, right? This is our teen space at the Brighton Library. Again, the furniture is very flexible and movable. This is the children's space at the Brighton Library, and we wanted to create an opportunity that the kids have their own space, but also the adults and the staff can have visibility into the space. Self-discovery. Places, as you see, and I'll talk about this in a minute, we really worked off of a different kind of shelving system, which is more, in Denver we have a bookstore called The Tattered Cover, and they actually create alcoves with their shelving. And so we did as much of that as we possibly could to break the shelving up. And it creates little spaces within the shelving that people can interact with information, just plop down and read. Collaborative. I think this is the biggest change in libraries over the past 40 years, is moving from the book to collaboration. When we were driving this morning on NPR, there was an interview with a photographer, I think his name is Robert Dawson, who's just done a, did anybody hear this? He's just done a photography book of library spaces, and something he said is just completely brilliant, which is libraries today are less about books and more about community. And the communities that they serve, and from one community to the next, that library is going to be different because of the needs of the community. The collaboration is something that is becoming one of the most important things in libraries. And planning for spaces for collaboration is very, very different than planning for space for bookshelving. So when we walk into our spaces, we always try to create an environment to the right, because that's the way people go, that we put our new books, and we also try to create a space where people can sit down or be comfortable. This is an experiment that happened at one of our libraries, and in our library, we've been working on something we call the experience zones, and so our staff are very creative. We do a fair amount of programming, but we also create opportunities for people to kind of bump into information, learn something. You might learn how to, you might see a little video of like how to make cupcakes, and then take a recipe, or this is a Zen garden. So what happened is the staff, this was going to be an adult experience zone. The staff had created this little sandbox, and they had Zen rakes, and I think they had quiet music, and they thought that adults would come in and this would be a peaceful place. But then it was summer, and within about 5 minutes, the kids came in and started like throwing sand out, and this is actually on kind of a rubber poured surface in an entryway. So the kids came in, took the whole place over, and the staff, being ever so flexible, said, oh well, I guess it's going to be a sandbox this summer. So they just brought in beach toys, and the kids interact with that space. And the team actually is also very mindful of like sweeping up. But it's all about that interacting with space and learning in a very different way. And I think that's my one takeaway of how libraries are different is we used to be a space where we organized information, organized knowledge, you checked out books, you did research, and now we're really becoming learning spaces. And as we know now from research, Howard Gardner is one of my favorites, is that people learn in very different ways. We used to be much more, reading was one of the ways, the predominant ways, visual, and now we're really moving into more multimedia. So the way people learn, we have to create spaces for people learning in very different ways. Collaboration, we have a fair number of study rooms, and I know that that's sometimes a challenge in libraries because how do you manage them? People love to have space where they can get away, and we actually start with the idea of study rooms, and now we call them anything rooms because the kids would, and it's first come, first served, the kids would take a room and they would be in there playing chess or something, and the adults would come in and say, they're not studying, they shouldn't have that space. So the idea behind the space is it's a group space, or it's a space where you can get away. One person could be in there, a group could be in there, and you can be noisy, or you can be quiet, you can be collaborative. And we have them designed in a way that there are lots of glass so that you can always see what's going on, and so that creates that security and that transparency. This is a family, I think, playing with garage band. Of course, this is something I think in the 50s and 60s and 70s this would be unheard of, but this is a very normal thing that you might see in a library today. Community. This is actually an outdoor space that we have at one of our libraries. We do a fundraiser, or did a fundraiser for a couple of years called Sparkopolis, like one of the best parties in town. We're not doing it right now because it was one of the best parties in town, but we didn't make any money. It was so much fun though, so we have to figure out a way to make money. We'll go back to it. But using outdoor space is another thing to create opportunities for people in the community to come together. In Adams County, we don't really have spaces that people can come together except the library. And it was actually, I think, at this party that we had a number of folks. First of all, we couldn't get them to go home. They had staked themselves out in one of the reading spaces, and they said, "This is our Ritz-Carlton." During the time that we were designing our spaces, I had some folks, not very many, some folks say, don't build a Taj Mahal, dumb it down, like our folks are just working class folks and they don't really need anything special. And I always held firm to the idea that the community deserves the best we can possibly afford. And when we opened our spaces, I had so many people. Some people who really are not people of means would come to me and say, "Thank you for not dumbing it down. Because thank you for taking the time and energy to design spaces that are really gorgeous and beautiful, because we deserve that." And when you are stewards of public money, I think you can't do anything less than give your community the very best value you possibly can. And so we always strive to do that. And that's what libraries are about. We never dumb things down. We're always trying to elevate our communities. This is outdoor space at the little Promac library. Again, that was our opening. Another idea of community, we actually have community gardens at 3 of our spaces. And those have become some of the most important community building opportunities. We work with Denver Urban Gardens, and their philosophy, their vision statement is building community one garden at a time. When I wrote the grant for these gardens to Tri-County Health, I was thinking healthy vegetables, healthy eating, right? And it's all about building community. The neighbors come together and they get to know each other, and it's actually the community that runs the garden. We provided the infrastructure, and we almost always have a couple of staff members on the steering committee, but the community really runs these gardens. And so it gives people an opportunity, and in the suburbs especially, this is a very important thing because lots of folks live next door to neighbors, but they don't really talk with each other as much. They don't get to know each other, and the library gives people an opportunity to actually get to know people that they're living close by to. People spaces. So I'm just going to kind of quickly go through, let me see how I'm doing for time. Go through some people spaces that we actually, things we do in our library, and it's going to reflect a lot of the words that you actually put up on the board. When you're planning again, collaboration. It's actually a team of our librarians who are trying to figure out Lego robotics. We do a fair amount of displays in our library and create learning opportunities. This is a music, Jelly Roll Morton display, and we actually made a telephone that people could actually play a Jelly Roll Morton tune. Or you could listen to his music, or you could check out his book. Some books on him, everyone jazz. I include this. This was our first collaborative public art project at our rural library, Bennett. Some places have funding for public art, and that wasn't part of our project, but we are committed to doing a collaborative public art project of our libraries, and we were in the middle of our second one. Our first one was this woman who is a quilter. However, she does it in an amazing way. And we asked her to do this. She collected stories from the people in the community about their lives living in this little town of Bennett. And they brought in pieces of artifacts from their lives and their families. So it's like a genealogy quilt in a way. They brought in letters, they brought in old shirts, cowboy shirts, they brought in little pieces of their wedding dress. And Deidre, she incorporated all of these stories into this acrylic quilt that, if you look at it very carefully, there's stories like, a farmer says, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life until I found this place, and then I knew my life would be the land. When we did the opening for the acrylic quilt, which is about 8 foot by 8 foot, there was a gentleman who came in, and I think he was a little surprised because he was thinking it was going to be a real quilt. And he had given one of his shirts, and he looked at that quilt and he said, doesn't look like a quilt to me. But he was proud of the fact that he was part of that artwork. So you need to create space in your libraries to incorporate these collaborations, the stories of your community, and display opportunities. This is one of our art experiences that we did with Fulcrum Press. That's a small press in Colorado, in Denver. Bob Barron is good friends with an artist, Thomas Locker, who does a number of children's books, and he is a painter of the Hudson River School. Thomas Locker loaned these, I think we had 9 or 10 of the paintings, to Bob Barron. And then, unfortunately, had a heart attack and he died. And so Bob is committed to putting these paintings on loan to libraries and museums around the country, and we were the first experiment. So we had the paintings, and in conjunction with that, because what we believe is it's not just about the work, the art, it's about helping people engage with it. So my staff did all these interactive experiences with this project, in which when you came close to the paintings, you would actually hear bird sounds and water sounds because the river. We brought in oil painters to do painting class with people. All summer long, we had projects that were connected to the art so that people themselves engaged in becoming artists. This is one of our children's spaces. Of course, kids interact and they have to touch things, and so you have to have lots of open space for kids to build their own worlds. And then outdoor spaces for people to learn. This is one of our outdoor classrooms with Nature Explorer. And we have a real live pump for kids to actually learn how to pump water. This is an example of creative space. Again, this is in the children's library. But creating spaces that you can easily move furniture around so that when you have a big event, this isn't a programming space, but this is a space that this is David Shannon, book author. We have about 250 people gathered in that space. It was the perfect place to have that program. It was the children's office. And it's just a way of, when you're planning space, always plan for opportunities for other things to happen there, especially parties. I was actually doing a tour of a new building, a new library building in Broward County in Florida when I was library director in West Palm Beach. And it was this glorious big atrium. And I was with my assistant director, who is a dear friend of mine, Chris Murray. And I looked at the space and I just thought, oh man, this is such a great space. And Chris and his wife came over to me and they said, Chris goes, look at all this wasted space. He goes, you could put so many books in here. And I said, Chris, look at all this glorious space. You could have so many parties in here. And of course, we have to create space for our books too, because books are, in my mind, the heart and soul of our libraries. But people are equally as important. And yes, space to dance. This is one of our backyard concert series that had to come in from the rain last summer. Space to create. We are working on a studio concept, which right now we have a studio, a teen studio at one of our branches, and we're going to be figuring out a way to make the studio concept work at all of our branches. So we actually have a green wall and video equipment that you can actually make a video or do photography. This is part of our maker space at one of our libraries, digital photography, textile. And one of the things that we're doing, because we can't afford to have as many staff people as we need to help folks, is that we're doing something called Artist in Residence. So we've created, and this was our staff, it's modeled a little bit off of the museum model in docents, but slightly different, is that people in the community who would like to share their expertise, we ask them to come in to commit to a certain amount of time, and it might be a 1 or 2 hour class, or it might be a couple of hours a week over a period of 5 to 6 to 8 weeks to come in and share their expertise. So you might be a photographer, or you might be a knitter or a textile person, or you might be a sound editing or a musician. And we pay them a small stipend. Not a lot of money, like $300 if you would commit to 6 weeks. And people are really enjoying this. So we're at the beginning of this project, but it's one way that we can connect our community and give them an opportunity to actually share their expertise. And I know in Vermont, you guys have tons and tons and tons of talent there. And then here's the Lego robotics, part of the makerspace, and our 3D printer. Where are you going to put a 3D printer in a library that was planned for books? And that's it. So I think I have a little bit of time for questions. About 10 minutes? 5 minutes? 3 minutes?
Lots.
Oh, we have plenty of time for questions. Yes?
Ma'am, what about sound management, with the noise factor? I know that is maybe a concept that's going out of style, but with regard to little children, let's say after school and what have you, do you have to engineer rooms that have like a high ceiling on them, so as to dissipate the sound? And also, what is the role of signage in a library?
Good. So sound management, we did work with sound engineers, and I think there's never going to be that quiet, perfect library that used to be. When I became library director in West Palm Beach, in a library that needed a lot of help and a lot of rescuing. We started building up clientele in the first year. I kept getting these folks who wanted to speak to the library director, which ruined their library because now there are other people in there making noise. So the materials you use are important, and I didn't really talk about this, but we have wood shelving in all of our libraries. It was just a blessing. I kept saying I want wood shelving, and my designers kept saying, and we'll never get wood shelving because we can't afford it. And so what happened is in our community, when the economy started to tank, a local craftsman, a cabinet maker, lost a fair amount of business, and his original bid had come in too high, but with wood coming in much less expensive, his bid came in actually the same cost for us as steel shelving. So we have wood shelving. So your materials really matter. We have the carpet tiles, we have wood. And so we did a fair amount of sound engineering. However, you still need to be mindful, and what we try to do is we work off of a zone theory, which is, and it could be different times of the day. The library is quieter than others, and we tell people that. If you really want a quiet time, the best time is to come in the morning and to be away from the children's department and story hour. We also create zones that we call whisper zones. I'm not sure where I was recently, but I saw that within the last day or two. There's space that we kind of say this is the quiet space or the whisper space. And the front of the library is usually noisier and more collaborative, and we try to carve out a space that's quieter. And again, places where people can go to the edge. So that old, quiet space where you weren't allowed to talk, I think that's gone forever. But there are spaces in the library that are quieter, and there are spaces that are more collaborative. And then your second question, signage. Signage is something that's incredibly important to us, and we're very mindful of making sure that the signs we have are communicating what we want to communicate and how we want to communicate, and also they're placed at the right place at the right time. And so we have a whole sign, our communications team, I kind of like the sign Nazis. We have minimal signage. And one of the reasons we have minimal signage is because we want people to see the things when they need to know what they need to know. Like, these are the cooking books. And if you have all that visual clutter, you're not going to see anything. So we are very careful. We probably should have a few more signs, and we're actually working on that, directional signs, but we keep it to a minimal, and we're very, very, very careful. We don't have any pieces of paper when you first walk in our doors. We don't allow anything taped to the front. We have display cases that have our materials and our brochures. We're very, very careful because how we project our image speaks to our community as to how much we care about them, and it also speaks to how we're presenting ourselves, and that presentation is a very strong language. And if we're all cluttered and dirty, we're saying we're not really very important.
One of the things that you have design-wise that I thought was really clever was the way you have words on the overhead light fixtures as a way to guide people.
That was
a really slick aesthetic, and it's informative at the same time.
It was very purposeful, and part of that is shifting that perception of what the libraries are about. So it's read, relax, I'm forgetting what the other one is, but we do use, and it actually is a light. We do use signage like that in ways so people know this might be a quieter space, read, this might be a noisier space. What else?
Did I read that you had dumped Dewey?
We dumped
Can
Dewey.
you talk about that a little bit? How did you, was there pushback? How did that go?
So, true confessions. When I was working at the Denver Public Library many moons ago, when I was the director of Children's Services, we did a fair number of focus groups as we were building the new library, and we were building branch libraries as well. So we found out what kids wanted in libraries and what was working for them. We also interviewed adults. And adults told us things like, I remember on a Saturday morning, sitting in the middle of the old Denver Public Library in the Burnham Point building, and people saying things like, I've been coming to this library for 10 years, and I know that you must have some kind of organizational system, but for the life of me, I can't figure it out. And for those of you who work in libraries, you know that Dewey actually is a brilliant system, but it doesn't, it requires translating. It could be job security as well. So, I secretly always wanted to dump Dewey, but I could never convince my staff to do it. When I moved to West Palm Beach and we did a fair amount of work on making the library work better for people, I kept pushing the staff, and they're like, no, no, no. So I said, you know, that's just a hurdle, I'm not gonna go. I'm just not gonna go there. But when I went to Anything Can Range You, an interesting thing happened. Of course, I kind of like planted a few little seeds, but our collection development team visited Maricopa County, and they had dumped Dewey and went to BISAC, which is the bookstore organization system. And the team came back and they said, this is really easy and it's simple and people get it. And it's just, I mean, the library director at the time said, there's an organizational system, it's just instead of it being numbers, it's words. And that's exactly what it is. And they said, we think we can do this and we'd like to transition our collection and would like to do it in a year. And I said, a year? So this is on top of the fact that we're building, like that year, I think we opened 3 libraries, they did opening day collections, and they decided to remap our collection from Dewey to words. And they did it, and how we did it is actually, we all hunkered down together. We did one small branch first, we closed the branch for a week, we all sat down, we like relabeled and RFID'd and put everything back on the shelf, and we opened up like the next Monday, and we had some folks there just in case people were grumpy, but we had moved everything around. So there was an elder man who, I think he was in his 80s, and he walked in and he looked around and he found our communications director, Steve Hansen, and he said, what's going on here? Steve's like, I don't know what it was. So Steve explained that we had moved things to a different organizational system that was really words. So you could see poetry, cooking, history, and the gentleman said, it's about time. And so that was it, basically. People love it, and it's the organizational system. We work with Baker and Taylor, and our team mapped all the Dewey numbers to words. And so we can go down 4 levels of words. So it could be cooking, healthy, international, just as an example. History is one that we often take it to different levels, and so that's how it's shelved. And then alphabetical by title. And it takes about 20 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute to help people understand that organizational system, and then they get it. They get it, and then they walk in the library, and we're a popular reading library. We're not a research library. I don't think it would work for a research library, but in our community it works. And our collections are, 20,000 books, or the largest collection is about 120,000. People get it, and the cool thing about it is then they get to figure things out on their own. They come in the library and they can use it. The users are empowered because they can figure out where things are. There's always the anomaly, and that just will always be there, but people love it, and our community loves it, and it makes the library so much more approachable. So the way we designed the library spaces is really adventure and self-discovery, as you can tell. So people come in and they can really discover things on their own and bump into things that they might not want to. So it's Winnie the Pooh 100 Acre Woods. If you remember that diagram from the end papers, that's really what our libraries are like. They're designed kind of like the 100 Acre Woods, in which we want people to kind of go off in the woods and seek out different things and bump into things and be curious about things, and it works. So I'm not encouraging anybody to dump Dewey unless you want to, unless your community wants to. I did a presentation a couple of years ago for the Alaska libraries, and a number of libraries are doing it there because they have paraprofessionals working in the libraries, and it really helps the team figure out how to help their customers and their community better.
Could you talk a little bit about the name Anything versus calling itself the library?
Sure.
If you remember.
So this is like another presentation, exactly. But I will talk about why we rebranded. And I don't, when I came on board, the library was the Rangeview Library District, and that's our corporate name. That still is our corporate name. But our library system had been the porous library system. Our community had abandoned us because we were in such bad shape and really didn't have a lot to offer them. We have a very young community. 70% of our population is under the age of 50. We have a lot of young families and a lot of savvy people who live there who had discarded the idea of a library being relevant to their lives. So we were doing all this important work that reorganizing new collections, staffing, culture, really looking at the library in a different way. And you can tell from our words, soaring, inspiring, playful, whimsical, though that's the personality of our library. Rangeview Library District and our logo that brand didn't really capture the energy and the passion of the library we were becoming. So my board of trustees, again, it's the dear, wonderful, magnificent people who have courage, were willing to take the risk to hire a marketing firm to rebrand. And this is after they had just rebranded. But nobody knew who we were, and the people who did know who we were had a really bad image of us. So it was just better to leap ahead. And we worked with a marketing company, Ricochet Ideas, a creative director, John Molina, and Tasso, the artist. And they took all of our energy and our passion and our words and our belief that we were going to become a library that was relevant in our community. And we worked through a process for about 6 to 7 months, and then we came up with a doodle, which is so whatever it is you want to be, right? It's anything is anything that you want to think or be or do. And the doodle ideas, I showed a video yesterday with the team that we were talking about really more of the culture. One of our staff says it's like spaghetti, it's mind spaghetti. The doodle is really the beginning of all ideas. And so anything in the doodle is just this fresh, new way of looking at libraries. And we believe that we need to shift perception because the world is changing and libraries are changing, and we want to hold on to those deep, wonderful roots of tradition. You know, that library in our community, in my mind, is still one of the most important places in your community. But we want to make sure that we stay in touch and we continue to be relevant for people today and the future. And so we needed to signal to our community that libraries, something really interesting is going on here. I told someone yesterday a story. In our board, when we first introduced this logo, I had a couple board members who were like, I love it, I get it. And I had a board member that was like, not so sure. And I had one board member who said, I don't like it at all. That board member actually was at the end of her term, and she went off, and a new board member came on who liked it, but she wasn't quite sure, and she has a couple teenage boys, and she wasn't quite sure about it. She's like, I'm not sure. I'm going to think about this for a while. And it took us a long while to actually do the entire transition of the brand, and one of them was monument signs. So finally we got to the place that everybody liked the way the signage was designed. And a year later, when we were doing strategic planning with our board of trustees, Linda said, I'm so glad that we went with anything. And we went with that brand because just recently my mom died. Her mom had Alzheimer's. And she said the last year or two, she really hasn't recognized my dad, she hasn't recognized me. But a couple of months ago, my dad was driving down 120th, and Linda and her mother saw the sign, the big anything sign in front of the library. And her mom looked at the sign and she said, anything. That's Linda's library. Is that amazing branding? So we think that we want people to have that strong, emotional, unique attachment to libraries. We don't want people just to come in and think about us as a book. We want people to think about our library as like a really important place in their lives and a piece of their lives. And so it's a story about anything.
Did you have the word library anywhere, or did you have public meetings about this? What I'm thinking about is people who would come into the community and say, where's the library?
Well, in our community, and again, it's a unique situation because our libraries were in such bad shape, and so our community was so grateful to have these really great, wonderful libraries, and we have a connector. It's Anything Arrange U Library. So there's that connection. Range U Library is a smaller, is in smaller font, but there's that connector. And what happened in our case is when we opened our library, and I wish I could show you the video that I showed you yesterday. When people come into the library, the people would say, wow, this is what a library looks like today? They were so impressed. It was so wonderful. So there was never any, well, what happened to my library? I mean, there's a few folks that were a little grumpy, but there's always a few folks that are a little grumpy. And we did marketing research with the University of Colorado marketing class before we launched the brand. And at the end, when we had walked through the process with them, the students, I said, what do you think? And the first hand that went up said, number one, libraries are dead. I never go to the library, and that's true in a lot of universities. Like students don't go to the library. And if you don't do something like this, your days are numbered. But with something like this, a brand like this, it'll trigger enough curiosity and energy. I'll give you another chance. And so, we're trying to connect the dots here between the traditional space and the space that's evolving for the future. We didn't do focus groups in our community, and I'll tell you why. The probability is, and I didn't do it this way, but the probability is when you design by committee, you get a camel, right? You know that saying that a camel is a horse designed by committee? To do brilliant work, you really have to do it very carefully, very mindfully, very thoughtfully, and creatively. And it's very, very easy to take a great idea that's not taken out at the right moment or framed in the right way for a couple of people who are grumpy to basically ruin something brilliant. So be careful about that. What else?
This is a more boring question, but I get a microphone. Just thinking about flexible spaces, and you talked about the furniture, and I'm wondering about bookcases and things and moving those, and who does that and how it happens, and do they move?
So our bookcases aren't on wheels, but that is a way that I know that some libraries manage flexible spaces and create open spaces for programs. Our bookcases do move, and actually the way we framed our rooms predominantly, we have a couple of hard walls, but our bookcases actually frame our rooms. And so as we make changes, and we've already evolved a little bit, and our facilities manager, our book shelving is actually modular, which means it's kind of like Tinker Toys. You can take it together and take it apart and put it back together again, which we actually did when we moved from one branch to a new branch. So it's a lot of work, and our facilities team does it, or we have brought in our cabinet folks to help us as well to reconfigure. So it's not something you want to do every Friday night. So if you need to do that kind of thing, definitely work with somebody or a company that has shelving on wheels. And I know a number of libraries have tried that.
I'm curious about the cost of how you were able to fund $43 million, and then what % increase of staff was required after building and funding on that?
So we were very, very, very leanly staffed when I started. For a population of about 350 people, we had 6 branches. About 34,000 square feet of library space is all we have in those 6 branches. Now we have about 120,000 square feet of library space, which is still under capacity for our population. We had something like about 6 people working for the district. We had 6 librarians working for the district, so we were very leanly staffed. So now we have about 105 FTE, about 150 people total. This is over a course of 7 years. And building one new branch, the 7th branch, which is our 45,000 square foot branch. The funding in Colorado, so we're a special taxing district, which means we basically, the way I look at it is it's like a nonprofit. We get our funding is dedicated from a dedicated mill levy, which is 3.69 on property taxes. The county commissioners appoint the library board, and I report to the library board. The funding for the capital projects was $43 million, and we have something called COP's, Certificate of Participation. And the best way I can explain it, I think, is it's like buying a house. So my house is $43 million, and we floated bonds, and every year for 20 years, I have a $3.5 million lease payment on my house. And at the end of that 20 years, it's over, right? We get the deed. So
Did the public have to vote on that bond?
Certificates of participation in Colorado, no. The public voted on the increase of the mill levy. And it's from that increase in mill levy that I actually make my house payment every year. So that's how the funding for the capital went. And we stretched that money as far as we could.
2 things. One, if you have access to it, you can watch the video. I'm not sure where it was yesterday, so I don't know what you can.
I have access to it.
Okay. And the other thing is, you talked at the very beginning about not having the honking big reference desks and people behind them. So I'm wondering, now when people come in and ask, we're seeing an evolution here too in terms of whether libraries have a reference desk, or they have information, or they have just some people. And I'm wondering how you handle that in the different libraries, where when people come in with questions of a reference type, where do they go and who helps them?
So I can show you. So we redesigned the desk, and we went, I mean, this is hard to believe, but we went through a couple of iterations as we were planning all these spaces. Our libraries were in such bad shape that even though we were building new libraries, we had to clean up the existing space, and we cleaned them up and painted them and tried to make them a little more bright and lively while we were moving into the new space. And we tried to kind of reconfigure some of those desks a little bit. And just that was a challenge because that physical edifice is kind of the territory of the domain of the staff. And they kind of like to be in that space. And there's nothing wrong with being in that space, but we really do operate on the roving philosophy. And so when you come into any of our libraries, you're going to the right, for the most part, you see new books. And fairly close to the front, there's going to be what we call a perch, which is a space where the staff perch, but we do think of it as perch, and they have little chairs that aren't really very comfortable. So it's not that we don't want staff to sit down, it's just that we just don't want them to think that that's where their territory is. Their territory is really the whole library. So we really do move around, and I'll see if I can find a picture of that. And then the video, Christine, is about 7-8 minutes. Is that okay? All right. So we worked with our designers, the cabinet folks, actually to make our spaces, our book shelving, but we also worked with them in an iterative way to create our new reference desk. This is actually a library that it's a public library, it's an I-Think library that's actually on a school campus that we opened last year. And they designed and built the library for us, mostly to our specs, and we run the library, but we don't run a school library, we run a public library. And that's an example of a perch. It's a two-person perch. There's nothing on the back. And we tried to do it in a way that's very kind of open and Scandinavian. We actually had folks from Sweden visit our library last year. And the folks from Sweden looked at our desks and they were very curious about them, and they said, "You didn't go far enough." And they said, "What?" Their desk, they just have, and it is circular, they just have a small circle space. There's no modesty panel, there's no drawers, and there's nothing on the desk. They said, "You're too messy." We didn't have too much stuff there, and I try to like not have so much clutter, but they said you need to have people take away the clutter. So their desk, they don't want anything to get in between the librarian, the computer librarian, and a flat surface. It's very egalitarian stuff.
And what about circulation? Is that take place somewhere else?
In this particular, so the back is open, and it's open purposely, so you can move very easily. At the very beginning, when we started talking about this, the staff were like feeling very vulnerable, but after we adapted kind of the new design of the spaces and the new desk, it just feels natural because you can just like walk up to the desk, you can stay there if you need to, or you can just move around. It's free. And the design really does influence behavior, as I'm sure our architects will tell you.
So can you check out books somewhere away from the desk?
So we have self-check, and our board, that was part of our design criteria, is that we wanted to be about 90% self-check, and we're actually hitting and exceeding that. Some of our libraries are at 95%, so yes. So we have self-check, and that, again, it was a design feature, and I think it's a little more challenging when you do things retrospectively about the way we lay things out, and we just said, we're going self-check, and it worked. So I'm gonna play you the video, we still have time. This was a community that I told the team yesterday, people were pretty grumpy about moving the library because the number of people in town of Brighton, it's a rural community, very agricultural, and now it's becoming a bedroom community, so lots and lots of changes going on. And lots of folks in town don't really love any of those changes, or some of the changes. The Brighton Urban Renewal Authority wanted the library, did a land swap, and they wanted the library to move to a downtown space that was adjacent to an armory that they wanted to renovate into a cultural center, which they did. They wanted to create that sense of that they have a main street and that sense of town, and they wanted the library to be part of that sense of town and community. That required moving about 6 blocks, 10 blocks from where the library which was close to a school in a more neighborhood community. So when I first came on board, this decision was just being finalized, and I get about 30 phone calls a day for a month or two of people telling me how horrible I was. And I hadn't even made the decision, but how horrible I was for like ruining their library and ruining their city. And they would never go to the new library, and it was going to be the worst thing that ever happened. And kids were going to be killed because they would have to crawl across the railroad tracks. But the railroad tracks have been there for 200 years, so I don't know why more kids would be killed today than it was just ridiculous as things happen. So the decision was made, the land was swapped, we built the new library. You've seen lots of images up there, and we did opening day, which was the opening day of the library, which was about 3 times bigger than the old library, and it was the launch of the new brand. And if I can get my video to queue up.
I'm sorry, could you clarify, did you move the library in town or out of town?
We moved it from, it was in town to begin with, but it was in a more residential area. It was across the street from the school, and we moved it closer to town. So my perspective was it was really 6 to 8 blocks. It wasn't that far. But it was a big deal to a number of people who didn't want anything to change. As you know, change is hard, right? So this is what happened on the day that it opened.
People might be surprised to hear a library director quoting Keith Richards with the Rolling Stones. Growing up, he says, there are 2 institutions that are the most powerful. One is the church, one is the library. The church belongs to God, the library belongs to you. The library is actually the great equalizer. I think that that's emblematic of what Anythink is all about. It belongs to you. Anythink is much, much more than the traditional library, where you just check out a book or a video or a DVD. Anythink is a place where you actually interact with the information and you make something special. You might read a cookbook and you have this gourmet meal with your family. You might read a poem and then you might fall in love. Anythink is a place that can actually change your life.
Anything? I think it's just a good name for anything you can think of.
Anything. You just, what is what it says. You can think outside the box.
We love talking about this sort of ongoing revolution that where we're turning everything upside down, or at least sideways.
Imagination can run wild.
Anything's possible. There's no limit to the possibility. Just put your mind to it. Anything you can think of.
If there's anything here that you need.
I think it's a great name. Cover. That's very good. It's a perfect name.
And shaking it up a little bit where it needs to be to create something new.
I like departing from what a library was.
What do you think? It's anything the library can offer.
That's the only name it can be.
Let's try it out and see what we think about anything.
We're not the stereotypical library.
It's clean, it's big, it's got a great kids area.
I think it's awesome.
CDs in the cases already, makes it a lot easier.
She's checking out some of the music CDs.
My team's been the conversion team to help get rid of all those Dewey Decimal System numbers and to put our WordThink brand on every single book. They've got like mystery cooking.
They have it all in little sections.
I like the architecture, I like how it's laid out, I like all the activities that are available.
It's great. It's beautiful. It's clean, it's fresh, it's fun.
Oh, I like it, you know, it's spacious, open, light, nice setup. It's pretty good. The computers, the televisions, the stuff at the east end down there with the guitar room and all of that, I thought that was pretty cool.
The people who walk through our doors are patrons, and their needs are to be served. In order to do that, it's important that the staff that's working on the floor be out and about.
Perhaps somebody's carrying it around with them, or it's on a return card or something. We can put it on hold, and then we'll get it as soon as it comes back.
Good customer service that you would find anywhere, library, retail store, wherever. It's that same quality of wanting to help you.
You just scan the library card, and then you scan the books, and you push checkout, and people are good to go. Go done. You're all good. Thank you.
What's interesting about anything is that this is the first time I've been invited to talk about technology in a library.
I hope that other libraries look to us to see what's possible.
I felt energized when I walked in here.
More than I expected it would be.
We've got a children's room, and for the little kids, it just lets them play around and just do their own thing. I liked the breakdancing class. They did like flips in the air, and they were really cool.
Oh, wow, there's something exciting going on at this place.
We just moved here, so we're excited that this is here to experience. What an exciting time to move to Brighton.
I think it's gonna blow people away when they come in here.
I think it's pretty cool. It's amazing. I think it's great.
Cool. Awesome.
I love that we have comfortable seating and that we encourage people to come in and hang out.
This seems like a nice place to be able to come to, sit, read.
The best things I saw today was the fireplace back there.
We look forward to the cold days. We can come out and read right in front of the fireplace.
It's really nice to have spaces to sit.
Give a nice place to get comfortable and enjoy books.
No expectation that you even have to check out a book. You can just come here and hang out, enjoy the beautiful environment.
I mean, it's so different from what we've been used to. I mean, we were crammed in such a little facility.
This is a fantastic improvement in the fact that it's larger, more variety.
I'm just amazed by the amount of books that the library has now. It's a great thing.
I mean, that other one was so small, and all the variety here, they have different sections now for the kids.
We've been anxiously awaiting, counting down to the opening of this.
When I became mayor, one of my goals was to try to revitalize the downtown area.
The library being downtown would be a huge benefit to Brighton.
Our plan is that this will serve as a hub to the community.
It really makes a difference in this area.
To see that cultural part, yeah, it's great.
This library will be where people meet, where people do things.
And I saw some rooms over there, so some people can get together and have some little conference and meeting each other, or we can start some club.
The rec center is already just such an asset to the community, and now this is another gem.
Brighton is so fortunate to have this new facility.
This is a great first step in towards, making the downtown, give it a fresh look.
And it's here now, it's beautiful, and I don't think we could ask for anything better.
Anything was an opportunity to expand and create a real brand that meant something to people, and the chance to stand out and be different in a library space when there's so much of the obvious was fantastic for us. So I think people have grabbed on anything and they're really celebrating it. A lot of people ask us about our new logo and about the blue and what that stands for.
The beginning of all ideas.
Anything else? Reminds me of spaghetti, but it's mind food.
The doodle can be anything you want it to be.
And the quest for information isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it wends around and you learn other things in the process.
The possibilities are endless.
Something that really resonates with people. They see it and they get it and they've done it and they can relate to it.
Dan, is this on YouTube? Could we show it to our boards?
It is on YouTube. I have to think of where it is. I think it's on YouTube if you just put in anything. It also is on, if you just go to our website, anything, in the menu there's a category towards the bottom that says anything tank. And if you go to anything tank, and if you have a little patience, sorry, we're redesigning our website again. If you go down, scroll down towards the bottom, we have a lot of collateral about our library, job descriptions, etc. And this video is part of it. So there's lots, if you Google anything, there's lots of our collateral out there in the universe. So,
Anything Brighton, Google brings us.
right, thank you very much. Yes, it is. And so this is what our community thinks of our library now.
And how do you handle, overdue books with automatic checkout?
That is a really good question. That's another disruption in our library system. We abandoned fines in 2009, and this is another thing that actually the staff initiated. It worked for us because we were in a certain place in our organization. We were collecting about $30,000 a year in fines, which in our budget was something that we could, we're not going to break the bank by not bringing in $30,000. And so our team put together a proposal and brought it to the library board, and this is how brave my board is. My board said, let's try it, to go fine-free. And so basically, the concept is give you a generous, like 3 to 4 weeks of grace time. Is that you don't have to pay a nickel or a dime or a quarter. We do send notices to people, and at the end of that grace period of 3 to 4 weeks, if you don't bring the book back, then you do have to buy it. But we don't collect fines, and it's working out quite well for us. And one of the reasons we do this is, again, being a children's librarian, so many kids will come in and they'll check books out, and then people are busy and they forget to bring them back, and then they have fines, $5, $10, $25, and the family can't pay for them. And as long as we get the books back, that's the most important thing. Because if the family can't pay those fines and then the kids can't use the library, what's the point, right? We want kids, we want people to use the library, so as long as we get the books back, we're good. And we do have a collection service, we use unique collections, so if you go past that grace period, then, and you get a couple of notices in the middle that says, Aunt Mamie wants to read that book, please bring it back so she can read it. So we try to be clever and funny, and we actually need to kind of rewrite that script again. But we do, at that point when people don't bring their books back, then the collection agency does manage it, and they do a very professional job of it.
With the self-checkout, how do you make sure that people aren't just walking away with the books?
Well, first of all, the self-check is fairly close to where the staff are. And the staff are pretty mindful and thoughtful, and yes, we are going to have some loss, but people could, whether it was self-check or not, people could still look out. So it is, we do expect people, we expect the best of people, and for the most part, they deliver. And so we try not to make our rules and regulations for the criminals. We try to make them for like the 95, 98, 97% of the wonderful people who love the library and feel responsibility. One thing I did want to say in connecting to the Dewey piece, going from Dewey to what we call as WordThink, is the, immediately we started to see a return on investment in that people started checking out nonfiction. So our staff will say, people are finding the poetry section, people are reading history, so kind of bringing it out and highlighting it and labeling it with really beautiful signs really work. So people are reading more nonfiction, which is great. Time?
I think probably one of the most popular things that library needs, though, are the movies, or those kinds of things. So is that still just self-checkout, and are the movies is the disc in the display? I mean, most of us now have these empty cases, and you go to the front desk to get the disc, How does that work in self-check?
Managing DVDs is a challenge for everybody, and I don't think there is a perfect solution, but I'll tell you what we have done. in all of our libraries, we have some kind of self-check that the DVDs are actually in the machine. So you pick up the most popular DVDs, the ones that might walk out the door. The case, and it might be a little disconnect from what was on the video, but the most popular DVDs and the DVDs that people place on hold, which are usually the new releases, for the most part are in the self-discharging machines, and then people do the self-check, so it's checked out to them. It's on their card, and then they put it in the case. So we don't, as you know, these machines are fairly expensive, and we don't have enough space or money to buy enough DVD dispensers for all of our collection. So the ones that are the backlist or some of the nonfiction things that we interfile with our books, we don't put those in the self-dispensing. So that's how we manage that. So I hope that you all will walk away today with some new ideas about planning spaces and thinking about your libraries in ways that might work for your community. We do things in a very unique, special way at our library, and it works for our community and our customers. And our community is absolutely loving our new libraries. We went from circulating about 750,000 books a year to about 2.4 million. So clearly, we're doing something right. But more importantly, people come to us and they say things like, our lives are changed because of anything, or I have never loved my library more than I loved it today. So that's really what we're all about, is trying to help our people fall in love with libraries. And so I hope that, I wish you the very best adventures as you rethink and replan your space